Dad came and got me off the tractor. He said, Larry's here to see you. You know what that's about? He thought, I guess I was in trouble, and I thought I was again too. And he came up and he said, hey, did you ever think about coming back to Stillwater? And I was at Great Plains at the time, and I said, well, yeah, I've always dreamed of coming back to Stillwater. And he said, well, I'm planning to retire, and I'm kind of looking for a succession planning piece. At that time, you know, I was really liking working at Great Plains, and I told Bruce about it, and Bruce said, just stay another year. You know, Bruce talked me into another year, and so I did not take the job then. But then that next year, I saw Larry in church that one Sunday. He said, hey, that job's still open if you want it. And that it was about a month later, Bruce had announced to Mike Bailey and I. Mike was the other assistant superintendent. He was coming to Francis Tuttle. I thought, hey, it'd be a good time to move back to Stillwater. So Larry played a huge role in my life, and like I said, that little yellow tablet, that's where I learned a lot of this history from, and also windshield time with Larry. He was a great storyteller, but just a very, very humble guy. Arch Alexander, I'll let the other two kind of relate to him, but Arch was kind of the, as I saw it, as a lower level agency person. Dr. Tuttle was kind of state director for the system, and he's a guy that went to the legislature and did all the front work. And Dr. Alexander was always the guy at home that we could go to, and I always looked at him as being state director for the agency. And while I was too intimidated to ever go to Dr. Tuttle, Dr. A's office was always open, and all I'd have to do is just say, Dr. A, I talked to you about this, and another good listener, you know.
Just a quick history of Larry Hansen. Larry Hansen also worked in the veterans training and the ramp up of that in Oklahoma in the late 40s and early 50s. Then he was named to head up Manpower, which was the old CETA program, or was CETA after Manpower, I can't remember. Anyway, he headed up Manpower for the state of Oklahoma. So that part of our culture is that led us into a lot of the business industry training and workforce training. A lot of those ideas came from Larry Hansen because of his involvement in economic development and training the Korean War veterans when they were coming back and setting up programs for them. So, you know, again, you have to look to where those people came from to understand what they contributed, and that was, to me, one of the things he contributed. And the other side of it, just like Tom said, the guy was a really gentleman. He was a gentleman. I remember when I was a new career tech administrator working at Canadian Valley, Roy took me to some meetings and met Larry Hansen. In fact, Larry Hansen was one of the first guys I met from the department. He introduced himself, wanted to know all about where I was from. Hey, I had a friend right away in the department, and that was Larry Hansen. So I just had tremendous respect for that guy. I think he helped us in the career tech schools and the technology center part of our system really look at ourselves introspectively and try to get better and better all the time, among a lot of other people too. But I really admire the gentleman qualities of Larry Hansen and the professionalism. He was just a great guy. Arch Alexander, to me, was an architect. A lot went on. I mean, whenever Dr. Tuttle had a vision for something, he went to Arch, his team, and they carried it out. Another strength of Arch Alexander was that he had that community college background. So he had the respect of a lot of the legislators involved throughout Western Oklahoma especially, and he also, with the regents, you know, he knew a lot of the people and was able to negotiate a lot of things for Dr. Tuttle. So they made a great team. Larry Hansen, Arch Alexander, and Francis Tuttle, tremendous team.
I actually took Larry's job when he retired as assistant state director, and when he retired and I inherited all this, he had area schools, business and industry services, the programs in the skill centers, the corrections department, equipment pool, and a whole list of other things. And even though I taught business education, I never quite figured out bookkeeping. Is the debit side over by the window, or is it over by the door? You know, that kind of a level of bookkeeper. And so Barbara and I moved on a Friday and Saturday into a little duplex in Stillwater. We were going to build a house. so I kind of got all my stuff and maybe more to get out of her way than anything else. I went down to move into my office on Sunday. And when I pulled open the door, there were these huge green ledger books, thick ledger books, not one or two, but 3 or 4. And I opened one up, and it had Canadian Valley, and it had debits and credits and, all sorts of columns in it and all that. And, then a page for Great Plains, or not page, but a section for Great Plains, and all these records and records and records, and they were all in Larry Hanson's handwriting. All the entries and all the writing were in Larry Hanson's. Man, I have really made a huge mistake here. I don't know how to do any of this. And so the next morning when Dwight Stoddard, who was kind of our tail gunner department, came in, I said, what are all these books? And he said, oh, Mr. Hanson just liked to keep his own records. And I said, I have to do that? Oh, no. He said, we've got all that on the computer. He said he just liked to do it. And but, to repeat, I guess, what Tom and Pat has said, I remember going to the State Department, and you ran across Larry in the hall. It just seemed like he had all the time in the world to talk to you. It was just so comfortable, and he was so supportive, so reassuring. He wanted you to be successful. He wanted your school to be successful, and he did everything to make that happen. Dr. Alexander was, I met Dr. Alexander actually when I was waiting tables at the Ming Room at OU in the early 60s. And he came in with the OU vocational educators, and of course I've been been national president of FBLA, and so that caused me then to be introduced to Larry Hanson. I don't honestly remember where he was. Arch Alexander, probably at Sayre at that period of time.
Yeah, probably.
He was superintendent of schools at Sayre, and Pat mentioned his knowledge of the community college system. Back in those days, several towns, El Reno, Sayre being 2 examples, had junior colleges as a part of their school system. And so Sayre Public Schools also had, I don't remember what they call it, I think probably Sayre Junior College.
Sayre Junior College,
Junior
yeah.
College. And so he kind of served both those roles. But it allowed us to develop a long-term relationship. I was later in the National Guard, and was Arch a general?
Colonel or
I
general?
think he's a colonel in the Guard, yeah.
When he retired. And Bruce Gray and I honestly kind of milked that deal. We had Jeeps and nobody had Jeeps. And, we were privates and whatever. And, but Arch was a great term, was an architect. He could really get things accomplished. If Arch had a single legacy, and he doesn't, but if he did, it would be in the equal rights for women arena. Back then, we just did not treat women with the same level of respect that we should have, and it was Arch's lot in life that we were going to, and not just in treatment, but in providing providing opportunities for women at the state agency and at the local level. I remember the first administrative job I had was at Moore Norman when we were building Moore Norman from the dirt up. And Arch was very insistent that we have programs that would help women grow and emerge. And what we had back then, we operated the first displaced homemaker program, for example. But he was particularly keen on staff development opportunities for women and putting women in leadership roles so that they would be ready then for leadership roles in their job opportunities. And I think Larry had so much to do with that.
Very good.
Just one more short story about Larry. I promise to be short. Also, and Roy, you mentioned the National Guard. Has nothing to do with career tech, but he tells a great story about when he was activated when McAllister had their riots. That's something that happened later. Suzette Northcutt, our board president, Francis Tuttle, loves to tell this story. When Clovis Weatherford left Francis Tuttle as superintendent, and they were kind of in flux as to what to do, Larry was kind of at that time was the state coordinator for area schools, and the assistant state director, I guess, and state coordinator for area schools. And Suzette developed a great relationship with Larry because he kind of nursemaided that school through that time. And she said, well, you know, can you be superintendent? Let's just name you interim superintendent, and then, you know, we'd like to have you take that position on. And he looked at her and he said, well, Suzette, I don't have a college degree. He just had an associate degree. And I think that speaks not only to Larry, but speaks to Francis Tuttle that, you know, he saw that degrees aren't what they're cracked up to be. Here's the guy that could arise to a high position of the state agency, and to the point to where, you know, Larry would have made a wonderful superintendent. Right. And she was just devastated because she thought I had my answer. But he said, no, I can't do that because I can't get a credential for that. But at any rate, that's just the kind of guy, you know, Larry was.
He actually didn't have an associate degree.
Yeah.
He actually didn't have an associate degree. He graduated from a private business school. And you remember Drawn's Business School? It wasn't Drawn's, but it was one like that. And
wow.
But I always admired how competent he was with that level of education.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's probably a lot of tribal stories that we haven't heard yet. So how about you pick one of your favorites? Let us know.
I'll think of some more after Roy and Pat get started, but when we were talking about the state agency and how Dr. Tuttle can handle superintendents, one that came to mind right away was, I don't know if any of you have heard legends of Ken Phelps, longtime superintendent. Anybody ever tried? I think I asked that once before on the other thing. Anyway, longtime superintendent at Tri-County. When he had his retirement deal, Ken was always one of these guys who just gave the state staff a hard time. I mean, whenever we were going to present in front of the states, in front of the superintendents, I didn't sleep at nights. I mean, because I just knew John Hopper or Ken Phelps or Bill Powers or Joe Lindley, you know, they were going to jump on you and just call you, you know, just call you down and challenge you on everything. So anyway, Ken Phelps, retirement deal, we had that in Bartlesville, and I remember because I drove Leo Presley and Francis Tuttle and maybe somebody else. There were four of us who drove to Bartlesville, and he even challenged Dr. Tuttle one time. I remember Dr. Tuttle saying, well, if you like my money, he said, I don't want your state staff coming to Tri-County, and Dr. Tuttle said, do you like my money? And then Ken Phelps said, well, I guess you can come in, you know, occasionally. But at any rate, Ken got up, and I thought he was going to have this speech where he kind of apologized to everybody, because the way he started out was, he said, for all my faculty and staff that I seemed a little gruff at times, and I was always kind of mean and angry, he said, you know, I probably was a little too hard on you, and I'm sorry for that. There's really a soft spot in me, and just kind of just had this real sincere, genuine apology. And he said, for all business and industry that, you know, one put programs in there, and I told you we couldn't afford it, or we didn't do this, and I couldn't get them in, and I want you to know that I really wanted to put those in, but I apologize for you all. And he had about 3 or 4 others, you know, and some of his state staff, not some of the state staff, some of his Tri-County staff. And then he said, and all you folks from the State Department, he said, for all those times I told you that you were dead wrong, he said, you still are. And then and then he just left.
A real character. So I remember the opportunity to speak before the superintendents was quite a nerve-wracking experience. And the first time I had an opportunity to do that, we had fired an auto body teacher at Canadian Valley. I think it was after Roy left, and I think Roy hired this guy, so we had to get rid of him. So I don't think he did, but Leo probably did.
No, I think I probably did.
Anyway, the process of firing this guy turned into a lawsuit, and there was all kinds of problems with it. But we did do a pretty good job in documentation, you know, and so I think Earl volunteered me to speak about that at a superintendent's meeting, and it was at Idaville campus, which was Comanche, so we knew that the little general, Mr. Powers, was going to be in the audience. So, you know, all of us that were kind of the underlings and the assistant superintendents and the directors like me knew that, boy, that first time up, you were probably gonna get, assaulted. They would try to undress you is what they'd really try to do. And they were mean about it sometimes, but, you know, most time they were just trying to test you, see what you're made of. And so you had to go through that sort of little rites of passage to survive it. I thought I did a pretty good job, but then, there was a little bit of silence at the end. I asked if there was any question, and Bill Powers went on about a 15-minute rant about how you could never do that in our schools in southeastern Oklahoma. We'd never do that. So anyway, that was one of the things that still sticks in my mind. The other one, real quickly, is the superintendents, when they travel around to visit each other's schools, and by the way, that's one of the real strengths of our system, is they learn from each other, and they look each other in the eye and tell about their mistakes and their successes, and then they try to get better from that. It's been going on for years and years. But at one of the superintendents meetings we had for Canadian Valley, all the superintendents stayed at a hotel there on Mustang Road, Joe, on I-40. And I don't know what the name of that hotel is now, but you know, it's been there for years. And so at the first night, at the end of the first day of the superintendent's meeting, they usually got together in the evening for a little bit of conversation and some adult beverages. So usually the host school would be the one that would kind of organize the adult beverages and the refreshments for the evening discussions. And so Earl didn't want to be there to do this, so I was the guy picked to be the bartender and the supervisor of the activities for the evening. And at that time, there was John Hopper, there was Joe Limley, there was Ron Vandiver, there was Bruce Gray, there was all of these strong characters, great leaders, and they all didn't want to go to bed at night. So I basically had to babysit them until wee hours of the morning, and after a couple of scotches, they could really tell some stories. So I'll never forget those experiences. I never forgave Earl for putting me in those roles, but really, it was good for me because I heard a lot of things that a lot of people didn't get to hear. And that was an amazing experience. I wish I could have videotaped some of that.
And if we had an 8 o'clock meeting, they were there.
They were the first ones there the next morning.
A good question, I think, of me is how did you know to separate biz when you came into the role of state director and have a strong individual as head? I mentioned earlier that I spent 2 years between teaching at Grant and going to Moore Norman in the State Department, in Oklahoma City office in the State Department, which was adult distributive education. And we had a very strong realtor in the office next door, Zelma King, who taught real estate all over the state. And the routine was that the superintendent at Fairview would call and say, we'd like to offer real estate, when can you teach? And it was a week-long course, Monday through Thursday evenings, 4 nights in a row. And Zelma would get her book out, and she'd thumb through it, and if it were this time of the year, she'd say, well, I can be in Fairview in May, the week of May the 7th. And then the phone would ring again, and somebody from Ada, well, I can be there in June. And so I would say to, and she was really great, and I would say to Zelma, why can't we train people to teach real estate in addition to you, because they can't do it as well as I can. And so when I became superintendent, and I guess to some extent at Moore Norman, I observed this. That was sort of the mentality in the business and industry services. And is that what we called it back then, or did we call it something else?
It was, no, not really. I don't know what name.
I can't remember what I called it, but you know what I'm talking about, business and industry services. They had their own trainers for the industry training division. And so when the Westinghouse plant came to Norman, Moore Norman provided the space, but the trainers came out of the State Department in Stillwater. And we had 3 people at the state office who were EMT trainers, emergency medical technician trainers, and 3 that did this and that and so forth. And so when I got the job as associate something wrong with this picture here. We're doing a whole lot of training out of the state agency, and everybody was just absolutely worked to death. I mean, well, you can imagine, travel to Fairview, spend a week in Fairview teaching real estate classes at night, and then the next week you're someplace else, and same thing with the industry guys. But probably the most important lesson, Earl Cowan was the welding teacher when I went to Canadian Valley. And about every afternoon after school, and after he kind of got things organized for the next day, he'd show up at my door, usually about 5 or 5:30, and his first question always, well, what's going on tonight? You know, and he was interested in what went on at the Capitol or what went on with sending school superintendents and so forth. And we had a really, really, really weak adult education program. The philosophy of the former superintendent was that if the day teacher, if we don't offer the program in the daytime, we don't offer it at night. Furthermore, if the teacher in the day program doesn't, if machine cut shop, for example, doesn't want to teach at night, then we won't have it. And when I kind of inquired about that gently, he said it just creates too much problems if you allow another teacher in. And so he had been gone about 30 or 40 minutes, and I said, we're going to turn this deal around here. And the adult coordinator we had was not interested to turn it around. So I do what we always do in education. I took the best master teacher we've ever seen at Canadian Valley, or maybe in the state of Oklahoma in the United States. Earl Cowan is a welding teacher. He truly is a master teacher, and moved him into administration. And so after about a month, Earl said to me correctly, I don't think you know what's going on in business and industry right now. And I'd like to organize a business industry outing for you. And I liked that idea, and I said, I have Lions Club every Thursday, so generally I try to be in town on Thursdays. I'll come back from Lions Club, and we'll go out, and you arrange the tour. So we'd visit every Thursday afternoon, 2 or 3 industries usually. And Canadian Valley includes got this West Reno industrial area here, so it wouldn't have a lot, and Chickasha had a lot of industry. And it really opened my eyes to talk to business leaders in their place of business week after week after week after week, to hear what their needs were and what we were not doing really, or some cases were doing to help them. So when I went to the State Department, to use an example, I called the head of the Training for Industry program in, and I said, we're not going to do any training out of here. And he was just dumbfounded. I said, we're going to train people at the local level how to do the kind of training that is needed. And that's our job, is to provide the training. Oh, they can't do it as well as we can do it. And I said, well, maybe not, but that's the model. And later I had to call him back in and say, you know, if the Westinghouse people praise vocational education for what they've done, I don't want them praising us. I want them praising Moore Norman, the school that serves their area. And then I had to call him in a couple of weeks later, and I said, I see your picture in the Norman transcript at the open house for Westinghouse. I don't ever want to see your picture in the paper again. If they want you to be in the picture, you say, no, we need the superintendent up here. We need the head of business industry training for Moore Norman. And we kind of did that methodically throughout the rest of the business and industry services department. And it was just obvious that it needed to be separated. It needed full-time attention. It needed somebody like Leo Presley. I don't know if any of you know Leo, but Leo was from high school days at Stillwater High School. Was just a phenomenal leader, still as an international consultant. And he came in and he had to continue to teach me. I called him in one day and I said, Leo, we're doing a bunch of stuff that doesn't have anything to do with vocational education, what I now know are soft skill stuff. And he said, well, I said, you're wrong. He said, we need to be doing that. And so he took me up to Perry, to Ed Malzahn, who San Francisco and learn something new, and I'd come back and tell my people about it and say, we're going to do this. He said, nowadays, the people that are going to do it need to be the ones in the conference, but we can't send everybody to San Francisco. We need it done here in this plant, or at least at Meridian Tech, and that's absolutely true. And so that, you know, sort of the evolution of all that. I remember a little bit.
Funny story about Leo and Jerry Morris, a longtime superintendent at Red River. One time came up to me and he said, and I don't know why he didn't tell this to Roy, but he said, would you tell Roy to quit sending Leo to all these national conferences? He said, every time he goes to one of those things, he's got my biz director all up in arms. We need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do that. He said, we've got a pretty good operation there, but we just don't need to be getting any better.
All this new stuff.
Leo was just always keeping the pot stirred up, and he always, I think he's the first time I ever heard the word reinventing. I heard from him. We got to continuously reinvent ourselves.
Right. So before our final question, I'd like to open it up to the audience. What questions would you all have for the panel?
Okay, one question would be, I heard the word succession plan. Okay, do you think somebody, if one of you three at the table could maybe mention that some way to our current State Department about a succession plan? Haven't really seen much of that in the last few years. Sorry.
Pass.
Well, I'll be the victim here. We have strongly suggested that to,
I'm kidding.
I know you're the state board. Yeah, they are working on it. But it is really important.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm being facetious, but I'm not. 18 months or whatever you said, you studied to be the state director. I've been in career tech 17 years. The last few years, we haven't been studying to be state director. We brought in people that, whether it's political or whatever, we haven't studied state director, so we've lost some of what you all are trying to share with us because they don't have the Oklahoma history of our system. And that's scary because of listening to the funding, listening to the Constitution, listening to the business and industry services and why it's an important piece of the puzzle. It's scary right now.
I'll take it. Sure is. We had 3 state directors in the last century, and I'm not sure how many we've had in this century, but several.
More than that.
You know, I tried to do that with Ann Benson. She'd been at the agency a long time, had increasingly responsible positions. But we've gone through an era, and I blame some of this in the Keating mentality of, well, actually, let me just do it. When in the waning years of my directorship, the last 2 years, with Keating as governor, it got to a point that I found it more productive to not talk about good things that we were doing than to talk about them. It just irritated him that somebody was doing well, that he didn't cause that to happen. And it further got to, not got to a point, but further was evident that if something happened before his administration started, it was not any good. And it was just frustrating as hell. And particularly when he would appoint state board members who had not only no connection to vocational education in terms of hiring graduates or in terms of, you know, any role, he went way out of his way to ensure that whoever he appointed didn't have much appreciation for vocational education. And bless Ann's heart, she had to carry on under that kind of mentality. But we went through an era here at both the local level and the Sharon Schoenthaler, who was Ann's secretary and is still there at the state director's assistant level, was at the state board meeting when Pete was being interviewed and then ultimately hired. And Sharon said to Pete, just trying to pass time, have you ever been to Stillwater? No, this is the second time I've been to Oklahoma. We had friends and we stopped in and stayed overnight with them a few years back in Norman. And so silence, and she said, well, Mr. Buzwell, what do you and your wife do on New Year's Eve? It was, approaching you. Well, we live in a flat in Boston, and we walk down to hear the Boston Pops on New Year's Eve every year. And Sharon said, oh, Mr. Buzwell, you're really going to like the Stillwater Community Band. And he'd never been to Stillwater, been to Oklahoma one time, didn't know any political leaders, etc. And I just hope we've learned our lesson. We need people like Keith Ballard, who grew up in Oklahoma and knows Oklahoma schools, Oklahoma legislators, to be our superintendent of Tulsa. We need a similar person in the room, in my opinion.
And that's one of the things, one of the things just quickly we comment is that we have this separate state board, we have this separate department, but we still have members of that state board that are politically tied. They're appointed by the governor. Well, this governor has appointed some really pretty good ones, but there are several that are hanging around and we've had some difficulty with. But believe me, we work hard when an opening comes on the board to put some names out there and say this would be a person that would be an excellent choice. And that's really the only way I think that you get some continuity there, where they do some good planning. I mean, they're doing a deal now where they're going to go out with these little focus groups around the state in several places. I don't know really what it's all about, but it's supposed to be to get input about what the next state director ought to be like. So.
Have them come talk to me.
You should be one focus group, should you, Roy? So anyway, I just like to pull my hair out.
Maybe as a follow-up to that question, and any degree that you could possibly answer this, if you had the ability to project yourself into the future 10 years down the road, what kind of picture would you paint for career tech? How would you see the system if you had the ability to see that in a perfect way?
He asked us to project 10 years down the road to see what we think career tech's going to look like and where it's going to go.
How you'd like to see it look?
Well, I would like to see continued improvement, quality, and excellence continue. And I do think we have some weak points throughout our system and in the state. We have some unity problems. We need to all stick together. That's what got us to this point today, and we need to do this. So my perfect vision is a strong career tech family with strong leadership from the top throughout the state, and then we try to make programs in all corners of the state of the highest quality with the highest support we possibly can, because we really right now don't have that, and that's something I think need to be improved on. I think programs like this, where you people are learning a little bit about what got us to this point and learning some of the stories of how we got there, gives you the opportunity to move forward and make that dream come true for us. So keep asking questions, keep trying to learn from people that are in the system but leaving. There are a lot of good people leaving our system in a lot of different places, and we need to really draw on that knowledge. That's a really good question.
I always tell people that ask about career tech that everything I know about career tech is 15 years old. So, take whatever I say with that in mind. But I'll start with something pretty basic. 10 years from now, I hope to come back and do the same presentation to yet another group. And I really do hope that there is significant color in the room. And you all can cause that to happen. If we don't begin to bring more people of color into our classrooms and into our administrative roles, both at the local level Secondly, I hope in the 10 years from now that you step back and take a real hard look at your school and what you're offering. And even though I've been gone 15 years and the role I had with Manufacturing Alliance, I had a lot of associations with schools. We're still offering some programs, and we did when I was there, that we shouldn't be offering. They're low skill. They don't need 2 years worth of expensive training, perhaps some shorter term training than 2 years.